All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, everybody's favorite day of the week. Well, you know, not including Saturday and Sunday. Friday's not your favorite day of the week? It depends. On? Oh, so you're fickle about your days of the week, right? Okay, I see. Well, I don't know. I like Friday. So, anybody gonna do anything fun on the weekend? Sleep. Sleep. That's it? Ooh, homework. Fun. Sleep and homework. That sounds like no fun at all. Yeah. Okay, so yesterday, I should probably say hi to people who are virtually here. So Clara's here. Good morning, Clara. And Amy's here. Good morning, Amy. Vicky is here. Good morning to you, Vicky. And Jack is here. Hello, Jack. And Daniel. Good morning, Jack. Nope. Good morning, Daniel. Sorry. I got stuck for a second there. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Sam. George is here. Good morning, George. And Shamimu's here. Good morning to you as well. Okay. So yesterday we were talking about, it was our first day about talking about ableism, right? Where we had sort of an oppressive relationship, or people with disabilities were disadvantaged as opposed to those in the dominant group, which are people who are able, right? And so we made a distinction between, or we talked about the social group of people being disabled as quite varied, right? And so it might be people who have visual impairments or can't hear. They could have mental or developmental disabilities. They could have intellectual disabilities. They could be on the autism spectrum. They could have some sort of physical disability. There's all kinds of different people that kind of fit into this category. And that's what makes it kind of interesting and tricky to deal with, right? Is that, you know, all the people, you know, in a minoritized group, when you're talking about gender, most of them are women, right? And so they kind of share that experience. But people who have disabilities are very diverse, right? They come from all kinds of different social groups. They have all kinds of different disabilities, and that influences their experience in society, right? We said that there are some stereotypes associated with people with disabilities, but again, that depends on what the disability actually is, right? And so again, it's difficult to kind of generalize about these people because they're just so different and they're so diverse. And sorry, I'm just going to jump ahead. And that kind of led us to talking or to meeting Adam Pearson, right? One particular individual with a disability that actually we didn't even talk about on the list that I provided, right? And so we met Adam and we said that Adam, of course, belongs to this social group of people with disabilities, right? He has a facial disfigurement. He doesn't see in one of his eyes, I think. And so he belongs in that disability social group. But what other social groups did he belong to?
White.
He's a white person?
He's a man.
He's an English speaker. He's a man.
Christian.
He's a, yeah, Christian-ish, or comes from a Christian background. Close enough. We could round him up to Christian. He's a celebrity, right? We're gonna give him that. He's more famous than anyone in this room, as far as I'm aware. So, he's a celebrity as compared to most of us, I think. Unless, are any of you celebrities in your home country that I just don't happen to know about? You are, yeah. You're actually like a pop star in Indonesia.
Yeah.
You're just kind of undercover at school.
I go out and then people ask for my signature.
Really? What's that like? Okay, so we'll call Adam a celebrity in this case. What else? Other social groups? Might be heterosexual, probably is. We don't know for sure, but again, most people identify as heterosexual, so if we had to put money somewhere, that's probably where we should put it. So Adam belongs to a number of dominant social groups in the UK, right? But of course, his membership in this group of people with disabilities puts him in a minoritized group, and as we can see, has pretty significant effects on his life, right, and how he lives it. So he's discriminated against in a number of ways. How does Adam experience, and any of the people he's talked to in this documentary, how do they experience discrimination? So we've met Adam, we met Lucas, the young man in school, we met Hayden, his friend in the bar with the hair over his eye, and Dan, the sort of Afghanistan vet who uses a wheelchair. So we've met 4 people, I think. So how do they experience discrimination in society?
Lucas got bullied at school.
What's that?
Lucas got bullied at school.
Yeah, Lucas was bullied at school, right? People said mean things to him and beat him up a little bit, right? What else? Okay.
Like they were, like discrimination against them were not as important as other discrimination.
Oh, okay. So we saw that people were not as informed about disableism or ableism or disability hate crimes. It seems like this is a type of oppression that people aren't really paying attention to, and everybody seems to know what racism is, and people know what hate crimes are with regard to race and religious affiliation, but disableism or ableism doesn't seem to be on anyone's radar, right? Nobody seems to be paying attention to that. What else do we see, Vera?
What happened at the bar, the wheel thing?
Yeah.
Is that microaggression or meta-aggression?
Right. Good question.
She did it on purpose. She was aware of what she was doing.
She was aware of what she was doing. She had probably had a few drinks, although, sometimes people are jerks without drinks, so who knows, right? I feel like it's probably not. There's probably not a hard line between microaggression and then just saying something completely hurtful. But in my mind, a microaggression is something that is. It's not meant to be hurtful, and if you just looked at it on the page, right? So if just somebody just wrote it down, it would seem like a perfectly innocent statement. But because of the context that it occurs in, that's what makes it hurtful. That's what makes it an aggression. And so, in a certain context, where are you from might be a microaggression, right? In theory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, in a classroom full of students that I know are international and from all kinds of different countries, it's not a microaggression, I don't think, if I ask Avera, where are you from? Because every student in this school is from somewhere else. And so it's not necessarily a microaggression. It's kind of up to you to decide. But context is important, right? So I would say that if you can write it out on the page and it doesn't look like anything offensive or hurtful, but then in a certain context it can be, I think that's the microaggression. If you yell a racial slur at someone, you can write that down on the page and it looks just as bad on the page as it does coming out of someone's mouth. And so I think that's where I might draw the line, but it's a tricky one. Right, so in the bar we see that woman come up. She tells him to do a wheelie, which is kind of a rude thing to do. She says a few things that are pretty hurtful. She says, about the chair, she says, "Are you stuck in it?" And it's like, oh, that's kind of not a nice thing to say to someone who uses a wheelchair, right? And in fact, he's not stuck in it, right? Because he has prosthetic legs. He just explains that he didn't wear them to the bar because, you get a little tipsy after a beer or two and he doesn't want to fall over, right? So Um, yeah, so we see her say some pretty insensitive things. We see her kind of treat Dan as public property and just tell him what to do. And the regular rules of, social norms, people seem to feel okay breaking those with someone who's in a minoritized group, or in this case, with a disability. And I'll come back to that. I'll point out another example of that in something else we'll watch after, but it'll come back. Other ways in which he experiences, bless you, discrimination. Yeah, no one wants to sit next to him on the bus, right? Which for most of us is kind of a privilege, right? I like it on the SkyTrain when I sit in the seat and nobody sits next to me and, is sitting on top of me. And, I'm a reasonably big guy and those seats are reasonably small, so I kind of like when nobody sits next to me. But you can also see how Adam would feel, where it would feel kind of, you'd feel that rejection, right? You'd feel that hurt when nobody ever sits anywhere next to you ever, right? You would feel that, right? And so most of us are just as happy when nobody sits beside us, but for Adam, it's that pattern probably makes him feel, it feels hurtful, right? It feels kind of rejecting. Other ways. Right, we see cyberbullying, right? So somebody leaves a very ugly comment on Adam's YouTube page under a video. Daniel?
When he walked on the street, everyone stare at him, they staring at him.
Right, so when he walks down the street, people stare at him, right? And we should probably give people a little bit of leeway here, right? Because I think we can all agree that Adam's face is pretty distinctive looking, right? It would make you look twice, right? Because and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in terms of what society determines as a normal face, his is outside of that boundary, right? It's a very distinctive face. And so you can understand people taking a second look, right? But he points out, and actually his mom points out, that she doesn't mind that people look at him because he does look different, but it's when they stare or when they're like, hey, look at that guy over there, then it's like, hey, respect people's privacy and don't make people feel uncomfortable. But he knows, and his mom knows, people are going to take a second look at him because he does look pretty significantly different from the average person, right? I think we can agree on that.
So those staring is microaggression?
It could be. Yeah, it could be, if it's excessive, right? And so again, I think we can, give people a bit of a pass in that he has a very different looking face, and people might take a second look. That's okay, but the staring and the pointing and the hey man, you've got to check this out. That's a bit much, right? So Sala says here, it's normal if people are looking at him, but they're looking awkwardly, then it's not okay. Yeah, exactly. So there's a line, right? And so it's difficult sometimes. Sometimes it has to do with intent. Sometimes it has to do with context. So that's what makes kind of microaggressions and interactions like this very tricky to diagnose, right? Because again, sometimes the thing that is said seems perfectly innocent on paper, but in a certain context it's not, right? Or sometimes, having a second look at Adam, it might be okay because that just might be your natural reaction to kind of look at him twice. But then there's a boundary between looking twice and like outwardly staring at him and making him feel uncomfortable, right? So that's why it's difficult to diagnose what's going on sometimes. How do Adam and the other people we've met in this documentary deal with people who behave badly towards them? What? Sometimes they ignore it, right? They just let it go. That's the easiest thing to do sometimes, right?
Adam stands up for his family.
So Adam is kind of taking a stand here, right? Which he mentions just before we cut off the video yesterday. He mentions that it's uncomfortable for him because I think his normal reaction is not to pay attention to it, right? Because he says, when he's sitting on the bed, and he says, in the course of this documentary, I'm confronting other people's behavior towards me, and I'm paying attention to it in a way that I usually don't, right? And so he says, that's taking a lot of processing, and it's difficult for him, right? And so you would imagine that the way he normally gets through this is he just ignores people's reactions, right? He just lets it go, he distracts himself, he pays attention to something else, and so him actually noticing how people behave towards him is uncomfortable, right? It's a lot of mental work he's having to do. But yeah, you would imagine that I think a lot of times he just ignores it, or he just lets it go, right? But yeah, the YouTube comment, he is actively stepping forward and saying, okay, I'm going to do something about this, right? If there wasn't a documentary crew there, if there was no camera and it was just Adam's life, do you think he would go to that degree to address it?
No.
Probably not, right? He's allowed to remove comments from his own page, so I would imagine he would remove the comment. But yeah, again, it's always just easier to let it go, and maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe in some cases it is, but in a lot of cases people don't challenge dominant groups, right? How else? Yeah, kind of, they use humor as a defense mechanism, right? They'll joke about it, or they'll try to make people laugh in order to, to sort of smooth out the situation. We mentioned yesterday that if someone's convicted of assaulting a disabled person, they get less time in jail than someone convicted of assaulting someone of a particular race or religious affiliation. And why is that?
Because the law think that race is like more severe problem than disability.
Seems like that is the case, right? And it's hard to know. This is the tricky part about the law, right? Is that there's the letter of the law and the intent of the law, right? And so the intent of the law is probably not to say that disability hate crimes are not a big deal and religious ones are. So the intent is probably not to distinguish, but the way that the letter of the law, the way it's written, does exactly that, right? It shows that disability hate crimes are not that big a deal. Hate crimes against a particular race or ethnicity or religion or gender, that's a big deal. Disability ones, no big deal, right? That's the message that is conveyed, right? Although it's probably not meant to do that, but that's, how can you come to any other conclusion?
Is that a result of how majority of society is socialized? Because you're taught about race and like not to be racist since young, but you don't exactly go to tell, hey, don't be mean to someone with a disfigured face. So is it because of we don't see it often?
It could be. So yeah, these things kind of, this is what's interesting, is that these, Adam makes a point, when they talk about the law in this documentary, Adam makes a point, so there's a problem from the top down. And it's like, yes, it is, but, it's also from the bottom up, right? Because all of those political leaders are socialized within the society they live in. They absorb social messages, and they find themselves in power, and they find themselves making laws that reflects the socialization that they've received, and just kind of what people are talking about in society, right? And so it doesn't just go from the top down or the bottom up. It kind of goes both ways. And so I think the fact that out in society, when he goes around and says, hey, do you know what disableism is? And people don't seem to know. And then you go to look at the laws and you find that, the laws seem to indicate this same pattern, that, disability hate crimes are just not on people's radar. I think those are reflective of the same thing, right? Is that, again, people don't think of it, they don't encounter it. We're not talking about it in society the same way. I think we can all agree right now we are talking about race, right? There's Black Lives Matter, there's George Floyd, there's Breonna Taylor, there's many others. It is being talked about right now. And political leaders are talking about it as a result. People aren't talking about disability hate crimes right now. And so political leaders aren't talking about it. Laws aren't being passed. Laws aren't being amended. You know, it's just kind of lost in the shuffle. And so, yeah, depending on what people are talking about, sometimes that's what politicians will talk about, and then that's what will make its way into the laws. And so, yeah, there's a socialization piece. There's a, you know, what's happening in society right now. And as I say, I think now we can agree that race is happening, right, in society. And again, it has to do with the way that laws are written and the way that those laws kind of affect people's lives, right? Right. So there's basically three problems with the conviction of disability hate crimes. So Adam shows us two graphs, and he says that it's estimated that there's a pretty significant amount of disability hate crimes in the UK and Wales on a yearly basis. But if you look at how many people are convicted of those hate crimes, not very many. So he goes to see that former Crown Prosecutor. His first name is Michael, and his last name I can't remember. He goes to visit him, and what does that guy tell him, that former Crown Prosecutor?
Police officers are embarrassed to ask about their disability.
Right. He says one of the problems is that police officers don't ask people about their disability. And that, what did you say a minute ago about what we're socialized, Avera? Yeah, but you said something, we're socialized not to...
We're not educated on this topic and how to act around people with disabilities.
Exactly.
It's out of the comfort zone.
Right, it's out of the comfort zone, and we're basically taught to ignore it, right? And so if you see someone with a disability, if you see someone in a wheelchair, you know, is it polite to say, hey, what happened to you? No, right? You're supposed to just leave it, right? You're not supposed to ask about people's disabilities. You're not supposed to draw attention to it. You know, if you met Adam Pearson, if Adam Pearson walked into the room, you know, it would be incredibly rude for us to say, dude, what's up with your face, right? That would be super, you know, super rude. And so we're kind of socialized in society. The social norm is not to draw attention to someone's disability, not to talk about it. And so the police, in a way, are at fault here, but they're also just acting on their socialization, right? They're not supposed to ask about it, so they don't. But in this case, they really need to, right? There needs to be some retraining, and they need to say, hey, you know, is your disability part of this incident that you're reporting?
So do we treat everyone equally, or are we supposed to? It's confusing because if someone needs help, I don't know, like, do you treat everyone equally, or you provide some people with more help? But if you provide them with more help, you're not treating everyone.
I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked that. So so Avera's question is, you know, how do we treat everyone equally, and can we? What does that mean? You know, can you treat people equally while still treating them differently? And the question here that you're asking is the difference between equality and equity, okay? And so equality is everyone gets the same, okay? So the example I use for this is, it's not the best example, but go with me on this. We're going to write an exam, okay? There's no midterm in this course, but pretend there was. We're going to write the midterm. But it's got to be equal, so no glasses, okay? Nobody is allowed to wear glasses. That way it will be equal. But is that fair? To those of us who don't need glasses, it's fine, right? But to those of us who cannot see words on a page without our glasses, is that fair? No. So is it fair that everybody should have to wear glasses during the exam with the same prescription? No, because some of you won't be able to read the words on the page with those glasses on. And so really what we're talking about is equity, right? So people get the support that they need in order to have kind of an equal experience, equal opportunity. So during the exam, if you need to wear glasses, then you wear them. If you don't need them, don't wear them, right? And that way everyone can see the words on the page equally and has an equal shot at getting a good mark, in theory. So yeah, that's the difference between equality, everyone gets the same, and equity, where people get the support they need in order to have the same opportunities as everyone else. And that's kind of what that scholar is talking about. I think I don't know if he's a constitutional law scholar or what he is, I forget, but he meets him kind of out by the sea, and they have coffee or tea outside. And he says, yeah, that there are groups in society that are vulnerable and they need extra protection, right? And so, yeah, we treat people differently so that they can have the same experience, right? We don't need special laws protecting white males, right? We do need special laws protecting transgender women, right? Because they are more vulnerable, they are more, society is more dangerous to them, and so they do need protection. And so, yeah, that's equity versus equality. Equality is like everyone gets the same. Equity is everyone gets what they need. That make sense? Okay. So the police the police are just kind of following their socialization, right? They're not drawing attention to people's disability, which is, in alignment with our social norms. We're not supposed to do that. But again, in this case, maybe the police need some extra training to make sure that they are asking about that, even though it might be uncomfortable for them, even though it's a little bit against social norms. Police work is different, right? So they might have to get some more training there. And so if they don't write up the report and include disability as a factor in this crime, what happens next? What's the second thing that the Crown Prosecutor brings up? Because he says three things. So the police don't record it as, they don't record the disability as part of the incident. And then what happens when it goes to court? Before the judge. Because who actually charges the person with a crime? No. This is the Crown Prosecutor so in the court you've got the judge, right? You've got the defendant and his lawyer, and then you've got the Crown Prosecutor. And so the Crown Prosecutor works for the state, and the Crown Prosecutor is saying, we, the state, charge you, Sabrina, with assault, right? So the state is charging you with assault, and that's what determines what sentence the judge uses, right? Can the judge sentence you guilty to murder or find you guilty of murder? No, because that's not what you're charged with. You can only be found guilty of the thing you were actually charged with. So it's kind of a domino effect, right? If the police don't mention someone's disability as part of the incident, can the Crown Prosecutor charge this person with a hate crime? No, because there's no evidence that it was motivated by their disability. And so it's not a hate crime, it's just an assault, right? And so if it goes before the judge as an assault, can the judge find this person guilty of a hate crime? No, just an assault, right? They're either guilty or not. And so there's kind of a domino effect here. And so the police aren't noting disability as part of their police report. The Crown Prosecutors aren't charging people with hate crimes. They're charging them with assault or something less. And as a result, they're not getting convicted as hate crimes either. They're getting convicted as something less, right? Assault, mischief, whatever, right? So there's kind of three things. And so Adam's saying, yeah, there are laws in place, but people just aren't using them correctly. And so there's a lack of training here maybe, right? In terms of law enforcement and getting these hate crimes taken seriously and getting them punished. But again, probably tied into the fact that disability hate crimes are not on people's radar. People are not talking about it. And again, if this was a racially motivated assault, you can bet that the police would put it in their report, the Crown Prosecutor would charge them with a hate crime, and it would go before the judge that way. But because those steps aren't happening, they're just getting tried as, you know, assault or mischief or something, a lesser charge, right? If the person reports it at all. And we saw with Hayden, the guy with the hair over one eye, he was assaulted twice in the bar. And the first time he took it to the police and the police were not that helpful. And so the second time he didn't report it at all, right? And so some of these things don't even make it into the court system because the people don't report it. They think, well, nothing's going to come of it. Nobody cares. What's that? They're not going to look at it. I'm just going to forget it and move on with my life, right? And so you have to wonder how many Haydens are out there that have had a crime committed against them, and you know, they just didn't report it because they felt nobody would do anything, right? Okay. Can we watch a little more? Okay. Online people, we've got about 20 minutes of the documentary left, and so you'll find the link in Microsoft Teams where it was yesterday. We'll watch the last 20, I think there's 21 minutes. We'll watch the last 20 minutes, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back here and talk, okay? So I'm going to put 33 minutes on the clock, and then online people, we'll see you back here after that, okay? Okay. So we're all done. We've seen the last part of this. And so question number 6 here, I asked you, what kind of stereotypical or prejudicial ideas have shaped his childhood and his adult life? So I'm talking about the interviews outside the movie theater. What does he kind of learn there? He's
Say that villains are portrayed differently, and he's different.
Yeah, right. So he's making the case that maybe some of our prejudicial ideas about people with disfigurements come from the movies, right? Come from media, and that's probably not hard to imagine because I think we can all think of movie villains who are disfigured or their faces are abnormal in some way. Oh, okay. I thought that was like a hand up. So give me an example of a disfigured or oddly figured movie villain. Voldemort, perfect, right? No nose.
Not in real life, guys. With the nose, he looks good.
Are you into Ralph Fiennes?
Made in Manhattan.
Okay, all right. I'm not judging. I'm just asking. Who else? We have Voldemort. Who else? Other movie villains who are disfigured or Captain Hook? Yeah, Captain Hook has a hook for a hand. He's missing his hand, right? He is disabled, right? Who else?
Cruella de Vil, but she's like psycho.
Cruella de Vil, yeah, she's psycho, but she's also pretty dramatic looking. I don't know if that's a disfigurement or not. She's pretty scary looking. Who else? Deadpool, although not a villain, maybe an anti-hero, but disfigured, right? Maleficent? She's got horns. Yeah, I don't think that counts as a disfigurement. Well, although in real life it probably would. But she lives in a fairy enchanted world. Huh?
Her ears are,
Does she have pointy ears?
yeah, they are I don't know.
Oh. Okay. Scar from the Lion King. Yeah, he's got a big scar down his face, right? So yeah, he's a good one. Darth Vader. If you've ever seen the movie, if the helmet comes off, he's all disfigured underneath. Who else?
Thanos from Endgame.
Sorry? Oh yeah, Thanos from Endgame, right? So he's obviously a different species of being, right? He's purple and ripped, but yeah, like he's got all scars on his face as well, right? So he's a little bit disfigured, and of course he looks different from, looking at him, he's not the hero. Although, there's lots of different people in that universe, so maybe, but he's got some scarring. Who else?
Gargamel from Smurfs.
Oh, Gargamel from the Smurfs. Yeah, no, he's not disfigured. He's not an attractive. Oh, he's got a big nose. Yeah, he's not the most attractive person. I don't think he has a disfigurement. He's just not hot, unfortunately. Maybe he was in his younger years. I don't know. Can you picture hot Gargamel? No. Anyway, we don't have to sort of look too far to find disfigured or scary-looking villains, right? The Joker and Two-Face from Batman. We don't have to look very far. And so Adam's maybe making a point that, yeah, every James Bond villain is, has some sort of, not everyone, but many of them have some sort of disfigurement or injury to their face. The new villain in the new Bond movie that's coming out definitely does. He has some sort of burning or something. I don't know who he is, though, because I haven't seen the movie. Yeah, our media communicates this idea to us, right? The idea that, bad people look bad on the outside, right? And usually the hero is hot, right? Maybe with the exception of Deadpool. But most of our other heroes are pretty good looking to some degree, right? accounting for taste. So maybe some of those prejudicial ideas come from there. Did you want to say something, or are you good? No? Okay. Right, so Adam does that psychological test, right? So he recruits that psychologist from Oxford. They get a bunch of volunteers in the room, and what do they do with them?
They make a test to see that like their prejudice level against this algorithm.
Right, so they do a computer test. There's pictures of people's faces. Some of them are disfigured. Maybe they sort of digitally manipulate some of them too, to try to uncover people's unconscious biases. So they say, and I don't know my psychology very well. I don't know quite how these tests operate, but of course the idea is that they uncover, subconscious biases. Haneen?
Yeah, I think these people who were born like with disability, they teach other people who are already perfect to accept and to be thankful they have. Because I know from my friends,
Yeah.
they have just scars and they complain a lot because they have acne and they look so bad with acne.
Right.
So I think this is
Yeah.
shows a good message.
Yeah. People. So yeah, to not only not to judge people by their appearance.
Yeah, I think it's for a reason.
Yeah.
This is happened to them.
Yeah. So yeah, not to judge people, but also the idea that
And will teach the society to.
and that you can. Well, let's talk about that in a second. Okay. So they do the test and they find that many people have a pretty significant bias towards people with some kind of facial disfigurement, right? And so again, the test is meant to uncover people's unconscious biases. It is, you can't cheat it, you can't manipulate it. It is designed that way. And again, I don't know too much about the psychology, so I don't know how these things work, but I'm going to trust the Oxford psychologist, trust that he knows what he's doing here. And then what happens?
And then the exposure changes their attitude.
Yeah. So they go downstairs, they meet Adam, they play Jenga with him. He's the world's worst Jenga player because on the first move he removes one from the bottom. Like, come on, man. Like, is this your first time playing? Anyway, I'm not gonna gang up on Adam here for this. But yeah, so they go down, they hang out, they ask questions, they talk, and lo and behold, when they are tested again, what happens? Yeah, their scores, their prejudice, their bias seems to decrease as a result of spending time with Adam and kind of getting to know someone, right? And that was something we read about in the article about prejudice, right? Is that, yes, prejudices stay very stable over time. Sometimes they are difficult to change, but they can be changed by kind of integrating and cooperating with people that you might have prejudice against. And of course, that's exactly what happens, right? They play a game together. And of course, that's pretty low stakes, right? They're not exactly, it's not like they're on the same team for sports or, they don't work together. They're just playing a game of Jenga for an afternoon. But even that seems to have some sort of effect on these people, and it changes their bias towards people with disfigurements just by meeting Adam and hanging out with him for a while, right? Oh yeah. So I think this is the test is interesting because again, it shows us that prejudices can be changed, and not only that we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, right? We shouldn't discriminate against people because of how they look, but also that that unconscious bias happens, right? That people do have bias even when they think they don't, right? Even when they think they're not operating from that perspective, sometimes if you don't pay attention, sometimes you are, right? I wanted to say something about this. Why do you think people are actually made uncomfortable by being around Adam? because I think, correct me if you disagree here, but I think in the course of this documentary, he's a pretty normal guy, right? Yeah, pretty average guy. He's funny. He jokes around. He's a pretty good dresser, I think. He's just seems like a normal average guy, right? And so kind of the only thing that's quite different about him is his face, right? But why do you think people are uncomfortable around him because of that? He is different.
People are used to, it's like, not everyone has that. It is like different, and sometimes when people encounter him or like see someone like him, it's like, oh, what's that? It's like something that's not ordinary. Some people have like that sort of like different look when they look at him.
Yeah, so he is different, right? He is different looking, and yeah, that can cause people to maybe be unsure about him. It's also interesting to think about where the line is between, because of course we're all unique, right? Everyone in this room looks different from one another, but where is the line between normal and not normal, right? I'm the only one in this room with a beard, and yet nobody's freaking out about that, right? At least I don't think you are. So, well, okay, Adele's got a little bit there, but I'm basically the only one, right? And so, but nobody's freaking out because this is a fairly normal thing. And so again, where's the line between normal and not normal, right? Because we all look different. Henny, you wanted to say something a minute ago? Oh shoot. Okay, if you think of it, let me know. Okay, Daniel.
It's like people afraid that their words can positive, like negatively affect you. Adam, like when the old man asked about twin brother, he's really like awkward and try to find a most polite way to ask him.
Right. So it has to do with that socialization piece, right? We're socialized not to draw attention to someone's disfigurement or disability, and in interacting with Adam, you're concerned. You're like, oh gosh, am I going to say the wrong thing, right? Or am I going to stare too much? So, we have the problem of microaggressions on one side, but then, pardon me, but then we have the issue of like, oh, I'm worried that I'm going to upset this person. I'm worried that I'm going to stare or create an awkward situation because I might not know how to interact with this person. Right, so yeah, that's a fear too, right? A bit of a social fear about, offending him or having it be awkward or looking like a bad person, kind of thing. Why else do you think people are uncomfortable around him?
Like people with like an ugly face usually associate with like a bad guy, like movies demonstrate that. Some
Yeah.
people like think that he's a bad guy, but he's actually not.
This is my
That's your point. Yeah. So
social media.
yeah, we're socialized. The prejudice out there is that people who are ugly or disfigured are bad people, right? And we see that in movies, right? That was his point of being outside the movie theater, is that when you see Voldemort on screen for the first time, when it's Ralph Fiennes, when you see him on screen, even if you don't know anything about Harry Potter or Hogwarts or any of that stuff, he's the bad guy, right? It takes you a split second to figure out, oh, this is, even if you've never heard of this story before, you don't know any of the characters, you don't know what's going on, you identify him as the bad guy very quickly, right? And so, again, that's the kind of stereotype, that's the kind of prejudicial idea that floats around, and yeah, sometimes we judge people by it. Anything else you can think of? There's one more thing I'm thinking of, but I want to see if anyone else has any other thoughts about why people might be uncomfortable around Adam.
They're scared to hurt his feelings or say something like wrong.
Stress, they feel stressed, like to start a conversation.
Yeah, they might be afraid to hurt his feelings. They might be afraid of saying the wrong thing. They might it might be a little bit awkward starting a conversation with him because, of course, when you meet him, your mind is trying to process his face, right? Because his face is quite distinct, right? And so people might not know how to start a conversation with him, so that definitely could happen. Danielle says, I mean, I think everyone thought Snape was the bad guy at first. Yeah, I know. I did too. Although I'm not done watching. I've only watched 3 of them yet. They're pretty good. I'm working my way through them. I've never read the books either, but I'm going to get through them. I've only seen the first 3. What is it? The first one, the Philosopher's Stone. What's the second one?
The
Chamber of Secrets, and then Chamber of Secrets, and then there's. Oh yeah, okay, no, I've only seen the first 2. Prisoner of Azkaban is the next one I've got to watch, so no spoilers. No spoilers. What's that?
Snape is a good guy.
That's the first one.
I figured, yeah, I know. He's a bit of a ruse. Oh yeah, okay, so the last thing I'll point out is that often when we are dealing with people, right? So if I'm talking to, I was going to use Yukimi, but she's got a mask on, so that's not going to work. If I'm talking to Haneen, right, I can see Haneen's face, right? And so as I'm talking to her, I'm watching her eyes and her facial expressions. And of course, humans are very good at judging facial expressions, and they watch for, how eyes move and how, the mouth moves and little muscle twitches. And we're very good at interpreting each other's facial expressions and judging their emotional states. I'm very good, as we all are, at figuring out if Haneen is kind of listening to me and if she kind of agrees with what I say. And if I say something offensive to her, I will probably be able to tell right away in her face. We're kind of used to that. But Adam's face in this case is not like that, right? Because does it emote? No. It kind of just, it looks the same all the time, right? Because of his condition, his face doesn't really move. It doesn't emote. And so when you're talking to Adam, it can be much more difficult to figure out, is he happy? Is he angry? Is he sad? Does he understand what I'm saying? Have I upset him? It can be much more difficult, right? And again, we're also used to looking into each other's eyes while speaking too, but can you see Adam's eyes?
Too small.
Not so much, right? He's got kind of skin that's over top, and it's a little bit, he doesn't see out of one eye, and it's difficult to actually see his eyes in talking to him. So that can make it more difficult as well, because we're very used to looking at each other's faces, well, or in the time of Corona, at least looking at each other's eyes, right? And judging. Do you find this? Here's a question for you. Do you find that you pay attention to your eye movements more when you have the mask on?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I do too. I can feel myself doing it. Like I can feel myself like emoting through my eyes because I know that people can't see the rest of my face, which is weird. But again, we're very used to that, right? We're very used to communicating that way. That's a comfortable way for humans to interact. And for Adam, some of that information is kind of denied to us, right? His face doesn't really emote. We don't really know what mood he's in. We can't really see his eyes, and so that can be difficult too. So yeah, that might be for him anyway, not all disfigured people, but for him that might be another added layer of discomfort, right? Is that you're interacting with him, but you're not kind of getting the same sort of information that you might get from an average person, right? And so again, I'm not trying to point anything out or be mean about Adam. I'm just trying to make us conscious of maybe why we might feel some of the things we feel when we're talking. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you are used to interacting with people's faces, and when you encounter someone with a different face or with a face that doesn't really emote, or that you can't see their eyes, it changes the sort of comfort level, right? Why do you think, you've probably seen in movies, maybe you've seen in movies, like those kind of American state troopers, they're cops and they pull over someone on the highway and they've got those mirrored shades on. Have you ever seen that? Those mirrored sunglasses?
Yeah.
You ever seen that in the movies? Yeah. Why do you think they wear those?
So that
Yeah.
The eye.
You can't see their eyes, so there's part of their emotional state is denied to you. And secondly, you're looking back at yourself, which is even worse, right? So now you feel self-conscious because you can see yourself in their lenses, and at the same time you can't see their eyes. And so they've kind of got power in that way over you because they're denying you some ability to read them. You can't read them with those mirrored shades. And you're looking at your own reflection, which is, you'll feel self-conscious about. So those mirrored shades are not for style, and they're not accidental. They're an emotional manipulation, if you will, right?
Should start wearing that every day.
Well, obviously sometimes they're for fashion, but when the cops wear them, they're not. There's a reason. There's a reason. So as a result of all that, what does he do? What does he choose to do, Adam? He realizes he can change people's prejudice, so he...
He
What-
tried to speak up and not afraid to be around people who's not.
Yeah, he kind of goes, he manages to go out into the community to try to change some minds. And so he takes that comedy class, right? And I think he was kind of funny. I think that was not bad. And then he goes into into a bar, right? So it's kind of an open mic night where sometimes bars will have a stage, and if you can just sign up and you can go up there and recite a poem, or if you're a musician, you can play your song for people, or if you're a comedian, you can get up there and tell jokes. Bars have this sometimes. Not on Saturday night, usually on like Tuesday night when no one's there, but they have them. And so, yeah, he goes to the bar and he gets up there with his jokes and he tells them, right? And so, do you think that's helpful?
Yeah. Yep.
Why?
So that everyone know him more. They no longer have prejudice against disabled.
Yeah, so people get to see him and interact with him a little bit. They get to interact with him from a safe distance because he's up there on stage and he's just talking and they're just listening to him. But they can kind of interact with him and see him as the person that he is, right? And so, yeah, with Adam, there's always the initial kind of shock of the face, like, whoa, that's a face, right? There's always that. But then people start to listen to him and think, oh yeah, he's a regular guy, which I think we could all agree. Yeah, he's a regular guy, celebrity, right? And so, yeah, he's trying to dispel prejudice by basically doing the experiment he did with the psychologist, but he's going to go out into the world and do it on his own. He's going to interact with people. He's going to kind of get in their faces, and by interacting with him, that will hopefully dispel prejudice, right? So is that helpful?
Help
Yeah.
and he's strong.
Yeah, and
For me, he teach a lesson for everyone.
and
Not afraid.
yeah, and that's one of the things I'll point out too, is that unfortunately, in many cases, the minoritized group does have to be strong like this. It shouldn't fall to minoritized groups to have to educate people about racism or sexism or ableism, but often it does. And so, women having the right to vote, women had to go out there and be strong, right? They had to go out there and spread the message in a society that didn't want to hear that women wanted to be involved in politics, right? People involved with Black Lives Matter have to go out there and say, hey, we have a problem with systemic racism in the US, and they have to say that to people who don't believe that and don't want to hear it, right? And so often minoritized groups, they shouldn't have to do it, but it often falls to them that they have to be stronger, they have to be braver, they have to be tougher, and they have to go out there and change people's minds. And again, they shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be a case of, show us you're deserving of the same privilege we have. It shouldn't be that way, but often they're the ones who have to do a lot of the work. And so you can see Adam doing the work here, right? What kind of things does it not change, though, his activities?
Not all the people's perspective of them. He can change all.
Right. He can't interact with everyone in the UK, right? So he's only one man. He can't change everyone's mind, right? So this is a good step. Of course, he's not going to be able to reach everybody.
But he tried.
But yeah, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not
Done nothing.
exactly, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I'm just trying to I'm trying to say, you know, he can affect some change, but what changes need to be made in addition? Yeah. Yeah. So what do his activities not change, for instance? Something we talked about a little bit earlier.
They stare. People are gonna stare, but you can change the way they will interact with them afterwards.
Yeah. He can change the way people interact with him afterwards, but there's always going to be that initial shock, right? He's a very distinctive looking person, and again, we have an idea of what a normal face looks like, and Adam's face is kind of outside of those boundaries, and so he's always going to have that happen. What about the law situation I was thinking about? Does his stand-up comedy change laws? Not necessarily, right? So that's what I'm saying, is that, you know, there is a disparity in terms of disability hate crimes. That needs to be fixed as well. What about Hollywood? Do you think Hollywood has a bit of a responsibility here?
Yeah.
Yeah? In what way?
In movies and stuff, they always portray the good guy or the good girl as like perfect looking one, and it's like they were usually white, but now they're like having a mix. But
Now we're seeing more diversity, right? Finally. But in the past, the Hollywood and movies and TV, kind of lazy, right? You saw a lot of the same.
they created this sort of like beauty standard.
Yeah, they've created a standard of beauty, and they've attached that standard of beauty to the hero, right? The hero is the beautiful prince or princess or whatever, right? Depending on the story.
I think most of it is socialization, because if you think about it, Hollywood nowadays they have like really good looking villains, and what's the result? People still idolize the villains because they're good looking.
Because they're good looking, yeah.
I always idolize the villains.
Who can you think of that like a villain that's beautiful, a beautiful villain? Lucifer? Yeah. Yeah, Lucifer, right? So he's a perfect, and he's often described that way too, as, you know, as he's beautiful, right? But people like him anyway, which actually shows you the power of socialization there too, because he's so beautiful, you don't even care that he's the devil, right? It's like, yeah, details, don't bother me with that. He's gorgeous, right? So, but yeah, Hollywood could be a little less lazy, right? And so come up with a bad guy, maybe who is not disfigured, right? Or who's, you know, or isn't an extreme, right? We talked about binary oppositions. People don't have to be grotesque or beautiful, right? They could be somewhere in the middle, right? So Hollywood has a role to play here, but Avera, you're right. There's a prejudice, there's a sort of an idea, a stereotype floating around in our socialization, and we can all work to change it, right? So yeah, Hollywood has a role. We as human beings have a role. Adam has a role. Everyone has kind of something to do in order to rectify the situation, right? So yeah, what Adam's doing is good, and it certainly requires a lot of bravery and strength. Even just to get up there and tell jokes, even if you're just an average person, is a horrifying thought for a lot of people. But of course, if you have a face like Adam's does, it takes an extra level of bravery to.
Yeah, it is like it's not anything.
Yeah.
In his mind, it's not.
Right, but again, that's probably another thing that we could point out too, Haneen, is that, you know, at least in Western society anyway, physical attractiveness is probably made a lot more important than it really needs to be, right? And so that might be something that we could think about too, is that, you know, not only judging the book by its cover, but, you know, do we look at the cover more than we really need to? right? So there's all kinds of things that we could think about.
Also, some movies like the ending, the bad or the good guy always like sometimes ends in like sitting in a wheelchair, or yeah, they get disabled.
Oh, that's the
Yeah.
punishment.
Yeah.
Right.
It makes the distinction between them. Like if you do something bad, so maybe they've done something.
Right. So that's a good point too, right? Is that often media will frame a disfigurement or a disablement as a punishment, right? And a legitimate one, right? So in the movie, the person has done something wrong, the person has been bad, and this is their consequence, right? But that's probably not true in real life, right? Adam has done nothing to, you know, to get a face like this, right? He hasn't, there's no sin he has committed. And so, you know, but that's an important point, right? We might feel that people, you know, who are disfigured might be bad people, and so they might deserve to look like that. And that might be happening under the surface too. That's a good one, actually, Anna. I hadn't thought of that. Okay, that is all the time we have. Online people, good work today. I will see you. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.